Welcome. This session I would call Survivor of the Fittest because it's the last session today and I really need my cup of coffee. My name is Ilinka Todorovski and I'm an Ombudsperson for Slovenian broadcaster, Radio Televizija Slovenia. And that's the building which is called my second home because I spent so much time there. And you see the statue in front of our building is a shepherd, a statue of very famous Slovenian artist. It's very joyous and he is also part of our logo, Radio Televizija Slovenia. Of course, I don't feel every day so joyous with the flute and so on. Rather, I feel something like that, like a lightning rod or punching bag or a waste bin, because everybody feels that can call me and tell me something very bad about our program and, of course, about me too. Well, that's what I feel and that's what I do. I receive the feedback about our program from listeners, viewers, and readers of our content. I try to send them to the right addresses to find answers. Of course, those feedback are not always just complaints, are also opinions, questions, and so on. And when complaints are made, I try to investigate them, and if they are justified, I write opinion, recommendation, advice, and then I respond to the public and try to encourage internal debate in the newsroom. At the end of the process, I report to the board and publish my opinion and recommendation on website and try to suggest improvements to journalists, editors, producers, all content creators, of course. Well, the expectations from both sides are very different, of course. The audience expectations are like that. I won't read those statements, but you can imagine because you are from the media industry all. So generally they want to be included in the process of deciding about our program. And they want to be sure that they are heard, that there is somebody who listens to them. And at the end of the day, in Slovenia, the public is paying license fee, about 13 euros per month, and they really want to know that they receive value for money. On the other side, you know what the complaints are. They are a big nuisance for content creators, of course, and well, the messenger is also the big nuisance, that's me. And there is a lot of suspicions in the newsroom in this part of my work. They really don't want to be over monitored, what I understand, of course, and they believe that if the mistakes are done, we should deal with them in the closed circles, of course, without washing our dirty line in the public. They also are very afraid of being under ongoing scrutiny and criticized, but in the public way. And they are, of course, also afraid of censoring, of be censored. That's the part of our, of course, history. And they couldn't be more wrong about that, because as an ombudsperson, I don't do nothing like this. I'm, of course, not an editor of editors. I'm not a judge. I don't seek punishment for anybody. I'm not a public relation officer to try to explain the public that they are always wrong and the content creators are the best. I'm also not a manager. I don't hire, I don't fire. And I'm not an intruder. I'm part of the process of making our broadcaster more trustworthy. I can give the content creators the second pair of eyes. Of course, I strongly advocate this anti-group thinking, you know, this tribal instinct in the newsroom. We always think that we do the things the best, that it's our way or no way, and if the public doesn't understand it, it's their fault, not ours. So I'm the one who can ask the question, are you sure? How do you know you are the best? Just consider this question. And of course, I'm one who cares, because I'm really in the media industry for more than 3 decades, and there are 3 crucial parts of my career which helped me today the most. The first period was when I was correspondent for Radio Televizija Slovenia from Croatia in the time of the war and transition, and a huge disputes between Slovenia and Croatia about border and so on. And I'm strongly against so-called patriotic journalism, because I believe journalism is good or bad, and that's all. And I learned the meaning of distance, impartiality, and later, when this is the second period, when I was an editor and also a host of some talk shows, I can see the meaning of backstage. What can go wrong? Because the mistakes sometimes are not made intentionally, of course, and public doesn't know that. And the third period was when I was at the Slovenian Financial Daily newspaper, where I learned the real meaning of accuracy, and especially context, because the context is the king of our work. And the numbers are just numbers. If we don't give them the context, they are without the values. When talking about numbers, this is the next slide. It shows the number of complaints, calls, letters I received last year. The number may look small, of course, if you give it in the context. If you know that BBC receives every day such an amount of feedback, it's small. But if you know that 10 years ago, when this position of Ombudsperson was established, the number was 10 times smaller. And if you know that I deal with all those feedback by myself, it's of course very great amount. And that's the chart of monthly inflow of feedback last year. You should know that last year we have our government step down, we have parliamentary elections, we have local elections, we have a referendum on very contentious question. But all those happened in the spring and in the autumn. But you see, the biggest amount of feedback came in August, in the middle of hot summer. Why was that? Because there was a talk show, just imagine, talk show with very famous Slovenian journalist, with a guest, very controversial Slovenian historian, and they talked about very contentious issue in Slovenia, which divided society all the time. It's connected with the past, with the history. You know, sometimes it seems that in Slovenia we live in the time of the Second World War. But be enough that you imagine a contentious stuff at your media, for example, I don't know, it may be a gender issue or climate change, something what really divides the public. Well, the feedback, the complaints exploded at that time. In fact, there was a tsunami in few waves. In the first wave, there came complaints from those who feel offended. They believed that the lies were told. They seek punishment for a journalist and apology from our media. The second wave came like, I don't know, like a pendulum. of course, this feedback was completely different. The viewers claimed that they are satisfied, excited, that the truth was finally said at public media. And they supported the journalist and seek from and ask from media to reward him. And there came the third wave after I wrote my opinion. And that were the protests against me, because one part thought that it's too soft, the other that it was too harsh. And there was tiny fourth wave made by journalists whose expectations were completely wrong. He thought that I would take his side. And that's, of course, big misconception about what I do as an ombudsperson. In my opinion, I told all those complainants in general that we don't have forbidden guests or forbidden topics, even if they are very, very contentious or controversial. But there are rules we had to follow to be trustworthy public media. In this particular content, I found some breaches of our guidelines connected with editors' decisions and conducting of interview, because the main issue was that the journalist didn't make an emotional distance, and he didn't stop the offenses which were said in this talk show. Well, my recommendation go in the, I recommended the newsroom and editor staff to make a serious internal debate, and I suggest to prepare a briefing session for all journalists and editors, of course. And the epilogue was that my report was accepted by board and by management, and media's values were, in a way, expressed in the clear way, but the heated public debate died away, and the newsroom could start work again. Well, I would like to believe that the lesson was learned, because that's one of the things my job is. But unfortunately, I feel like this guy you see in the corner. His hero from Greek mythology, he's called Sisyphus, who is rolling. His destiny is to roll the stone to the mountain all around from day to day, because the same journalist in the same talk show, he invited highly contentious and controversial psychologists this time, and they discussed gender issues, and these psychologists thought that there is no such a thing as equality between genders, you know, and this explosion happened again. So that was just one of the cases, and the thing is that nearly everything connected with our broadcaster system could be under scrutiny of the public. It's something what surprised me the most 2 years ago when I started this job. Everything, you know, from, I don't know, technical issues, schedule, punctuality, language, the look of our presenters, and so on and so on. And when somebody asks me what to do with all those feedback, I always say, well, keep calm, start to listen to them, start to read them, start to answer to them, and of course start to learn from them, because you have to improve. And at the end of the day, you have to be grateful that those the feedback is here, because it means that you are still relevant, that somebody is watching you, listening to you, and read your stuff. Here are maybe some tips. Again, I won't read them, but there are some tips how to deal with the public concerns about the program. I think that the most important thing is to answer with information and not emotion, and to explain all over again, because sometimes the biggest challenge is to explain to the public why something happened on the screen, why something happened in the program, and why the decision was made just in that way and not in something in the other way. But sometimes you have to agree to disagree and just quit the communication. Well, the bigger problem is if you are stonewalled by content creators, of course, because they really don't want to be criticized in the public, and I understand it quite well. I'm one of them in this way, because I started in journalism 3 decades ago. So the most important thing is to find the way to be seen, heard, and informed, and try to be fair, and never make it personal. Just keep the neutral tone, and when shuttle those ideas from the public to the content creators, is useful to anonymize those complaints, because if you don't do it, you can open the polemics about the question who sent the complaint, and not about the content of the complaint, what's important. And if they don't want to answer to the complaints, I sometimes use the last thing. I just say to them, just do what you preach, because you just want, you want and you ask the public service in Slovenia to be transparent, to be open, to be fair, to be uncorrupted, and so on. And you want that everybody answer to your question. So if somebody is asking a question to you, why don't answer? Well, I believe that every media have to have a kind of complainant framework. I don't know if the Ombudsperson is the best way of dealing with those complaints, but these are some points which I found very useful when you will think if you don't have something like that. I think that the Ombudsperson is very useful, could be very useful, because she can play a role of go between, you know, the role of someone who can mediate, and what's the most important, to be a mirror of expectations and concerns of our public. And somebody has to be available and accessible all the time, I believe. And when you are in a newsroom, you know that very well. You can't answer all the questions and explaining between your working process. I think that if you have this model of complaining framework, it's very useful, because one of media people, can always suggest the best solutions, and sometimes it's just enough to be the voice of reason. Well, at the end of this presentation, I ask rhetorical question, of course, who benefits? And I really believe that everybody benefits, because if we talk about these 3 parts, a relationship, audience, media, journalism, well, audience gain trust, connection, faith. Media could improve with more accountability and serve the public in the best way. And of course, journalism, who become more credible, relevant, trustworthy, and that's what I really think the journalism should do, especially in today's very complex world. And I really believe in journalism. Maybe I'm more traditional than previous guests, but I still believe that the content is the part of our work which is most important, but of course also the way of giving it to the public. Well, that was my presentation. That's also my website and my email if somebody wants to, I don't know, write to me, not complain, of course. Well, you won't find me on social medias. Why? I'm often asked about it. Because I simply don't want to be bullied, you know? I can't stand it. I think that I'm very open to any question, any suggestion, any requirement, and everything from the public and everything from my colleagues, and the ways to reach me are very, very open. So it's not necessary to do it in this way. So that was my presentation. I can take a question or two. Thank you. Do we have actually any questions? Would you like something to ask about the feedback? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I have one observation, and that as a content creator, I used to always contact people directly. Yes. That used to write in. I didn't hide behind any big department that would answer the question for me. And one thing I found it when I used to phone them, and they used to A, be shocked that I'd phoned, and B, when I'd explained what the answer to their query or criticism was, they usually said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was drunk when I rang," or "It was very late, and I really love what you do. I really love what you do. I was really irritated." And actually, they become a bigger friend of you than when they started off. So in fact, by doing it, you actually create, and then they go and tell all their friends. They say, the guy from the BBC, he rang me back and he was so nice. I like him. And you must watch or listen or whatever to his program or website or whatever. So actually, you can turn people round more than 180 degrees if you do it. I don't know why content creators are so frightened about the people that pay your wages. That's my observation. So
thank you very much.
I
do it the same way, you know. I very often call them, and of course I always answer their phone calls. Always. It's very, it's very time consuming because you have to listen about their stories, personal stories, and so on. But it's so interesting. I give myself a test. Could I go through the conversation without, make myself so nervous to be angry and so on. But at the end of the day, we are all happy. And sometimes, when I call them back, they ask me, "What? Ilinka Todorovski? What? Are you serious?" They can't believe it that somebody called them back and it's prepared to explain them. Yeah. Explain them. Because, accuracy, small mistakes, bias, balanced. In Slovenia, the big question is if the program is balanced, left, right, conservative, other stuff. And if you explain that you don't have so big opportunity to invite so many different guests, for example, in our panels, talk shows, well, it's very good. But it's time consuming. You have to have a strong anger management by yourself and so on. But I really believe that everybody benefits from it.
Wow! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.